Hello everyone, don't you think it'd be fun to be able to go up and talk to somebody and certain key elements are highlighted, such as maybe objectives, like the wallet there, or directions can be their own separate color, or alternate objectives, whatever you would want to call that. Well, let's go over that. It's actually not too complicated. I'm going to move it over here, get it out of the way. Got a brand new clean empty project right here. So first thing that we are going to need to do is we need someone to talk to. So I'm going to right click, create a blueprint class of a character. This will be my BP underscore NPC, just random generic person to talk to. We'll open it up and we'll just go ahead and set it up. So we'll set the mesh to be Quinn. Oops, -90, -90. Then we're going to need a way to actually communicate information over to the NPC and back to the player. So we'll right click blueprint. We're going to use interfaces for this. So we'll have two of them. One is the BPI underscore interact. And what this does, it'll let this communicate over to this without needing too heavy of a data pool. We'll open it up and this first function will be called interact. Now we need another one, another blueprint interface. This one is BPI underscore player, and this will let the NPC communicate back. So we'll open it up, and we will do a start speaking function, and then we'll do one more that is stop speaking. Now for the start speaking, we're going to need an input that is text to show, or whatever you want to call it. It could be speech, it could be blah, blah, blah. It'll be a string though, so that's the part that matters. Make sure it's a string. Name it what you want, make it a string. So now in our NPC, under the class settings, we can add that interact interface, compile it, and then in the event graph we can do an event interact, and when this character is interacted with, it means that the player is trying to talk to it. So we need to get the player character, and we are going to do a start speaking message. The text to show, we'll right click and promote that to a variable called speech, but then we're going to immediately delete it. Highlight the variable, and then over here we can turn it into an array. That way if they got multiple lines, we'll be able to get them. We'll grab that out. We're going to get a copy of the item at the array. We'll right click the number that we want and promote that to a variable called current speech. And then after we've told it that we're speaking, we'll do this for now and then we'll come back. Alright, so in our third person character blueprint, or whatever your character is, go into the class settings and we need to add that player interface to it. Then down at the bottom on event start speaking and event stop speaking. Then we'll right click one, add a keyboard event, press this little key, and it'll make it to where whatever button you press will be inputted. I want this to be my E. This will be my interact trace setup. But before we can actually show the player what's happening, we need to actually create the user interface. So right click user interface, UI underscore player HUD. This will be basically the main viewport that holds all your players' information, the main screen. We're going to add a canvas panel to it. Then we're going to right click and wrap with a scale box. Wrap with a size box. So the scale box makes sure everything fits in the same size that we're going to establish here, which will be 1920 by 1080, or whatever resolution you're trying to reach. Now we'll also throw in a border, and I'm going to anchor it down to the bottom left. This is what's going to hold our dialog widget, so we'll call it dialog holder and make sure that it is a variable. For the alignment, X, 0, 1 on the Y, but I'll show you Y first. Show you Y. So if it's at 0, it sits on the bottom side of this. If it's at 1, it sits at the top side. 0.5 is halfway in between. I want it to be sitting up on top, so I can put in a -50 on the position Y, and then it's just the same. For the size of this one, I'm going to go 750 by 200. But customize it to whatever you want yours to be. So let's get rid of this white background. It's not the content color and opacity. If you change this down, it will change everything. We want to set the brush color. This is what affects the image in the background. You can even set it probably to a texture if you want. I don't know. But I'm just going to get rid of it. That way, if we're not talking to anybody, we got nothing on screen. We are going to need one more user interface widget, and then we'll need the actual speech bubble. So this be UI_speech bubble. Open that up, and I'm going to throw a canvas panel out. But on fill screen, I'm going to set it to custom on screen, and I'm going to make it match the dimensions of that dialog holder that we set up. So 750 by 200. Then I'm going to add an image to the background of it, because when the character is talking, I want it to be able to be more visible than just text. For the color and opacity, I'm going to set the value to 0 so it's black, and then alpha to 0.75 so it's kind of see-through. Then I'm going to add a rich text block, not a text block, rich text. This is our actual dialog box. Now we'll anchor it to the full thing and then replace the offsets all with 0 so that it's right there. Now if we try to punch anything in, you'll see it just pops up with that. But no worries, we shall fix that momentarily. But first, before we get over onto that part, let's jump into the graph and set a custom event called speaking that will take in an input of a string that will be our speech. Change it over to a string, grab our dialog box, and we will set the text to that right there. So now we can go into our player blueprint, and we need a way to actually interact with this person because we have no way of doing that at the moment. We're going to do that with an interact trace. So I'm going to set a function. This will be my interact trace, and I'm just going to do a sphere trace around the character to get whatever's around it. So I'll do a sphere trace by channel. I'm just going to get the actor location of the current character for the start and the end, and then I'm just going to set a radius of around 50 around it. We'll do a draw debug on this just to see if that's a good size for it. We want to do a break hit result on the out hit. Holding B and left clicking gets us a branch. I'm kind of running through this one kind of fast because if you've come back before, you've seen this happen so many times. If the hit actor, we want to see if it is valid. And if it is, then we want to communicate our interact message across through the interface. So we're sphere tracing around, seeing if we hit anything, checking if it is valid, and then telling it, hey, we're trying to talk to you. If it doesn't implement the interface, it doesn't do anything. If it does, it'll call its functions. So over in here, we got this, start speaking. Alright, so we can go back to the event graph and hook our interact trace right there. Ouch. So, on begin play in our person, or our character, we need to actually add this main HUD widget to our screen. So we're going to create widget, that will be our player HUD. Right click, promote to variable called player HUD. That way we can add our speech to it down below. And then from here we will add to viewport. That way it's on our window. Then when we start speaking, we will get our player HUD. We're going to have to create a widget because we need to create that speech bubble that we will then promote to a variable called speech bubble. Then we can disconnect from here. It's just easier sometimes to do that, and then but we want to check to see if our speech bubble is already valid. So if we grab that speech bubble variable that we just made, right click it and do a convert to validated get, then when we hook this up we can check to see if it's valid. If it is not, then we need to create it. If it is, we don't want to keep creating them on top of each other. We want to just use the one we already got. So we will add to viewport. If this is valid, this one will be fine to use. Even though it comes off a different line, it's just this variable. If it makes you feel better though, you can like that and then just disconnect that one. Sometimes I get paranoid about it, but I've tested it. It works fine. So once we've added this to viewport, we need to tell it what we're trying to say. So speaking. Now you can do this one of two ways. You can promote this to a variable and then plug it in, or you can do what I'm gonna do and just cross it over like that and then try not to think about it too much. Yeah, try not to think about it too much. And then once we've done that, we need to actually add this to our player HUD. So from our player HUD, we can get our dialogue holder, and we can add a child. And the child that we add will be our speech bubble we just created. Compile that. Now for the stop speaking, we basically want to get our speech bubble and we're going to remove it from parent. So if we're adding it as a child up here, that means the dialogue holder becomes its parent, and if we remove it from it, then it takes it back off the screen. Now for our NPC, let's see. Under speech bubble. I feel like I'm missing something, but I don't. For the speech, we can turn this up. Oh, okay. So now we need to actually set up, because if we try to punch anything now, like for instance, we go in here to the dialog box and punch anything in, it's just going to say that. So we need to right click, and under miscellaneous, we need a data table. Now we don't have to create any structures for it. There's already one that exists, and it is called the rich text style row. And we'll click OK, and this will be DT underscore text styles. And I'm going to add 3. So there's going to be 1 that will be our default, 1 more that will be our objective, and then 1 more that is the direction. So for instance, you got your basic white font, you know, the regular speech, however you want most of your text in a game to appear. Then you'll have settings for objectives, so if you want it to glow gold or something like that, or be outlined, or if you want them shrunk or italic, whatever you want. But you need to establish those down here. So once you have one selected, down below we can adjust the font, the color, the shadow offset, any text settings that you have, you can do that here. For the font, I am going to set this to Roboto. You can use whatever you got. I'm going to leave it at 24, but for the color, I'm going to set this to white. For objectives, I'm going to also use Roboto, but I'm going to set this to be italic. Nope. Bold? Nah, italic's fine. And for the color, I'm going to set it to be this kind of gold that is 1 on the red, 0.5 on the green, 0 on the blue. Nice little color. For direction, also Roboto. This will be bold italic, just so we can see some differences. For the skew amount, why not? We'll put 0.25. And then for this one, we'll put 0.5 and 0.5. So it's got this kind of bluish color. You can make it whatever you want. Just let me know what I'm doing. Alright, so in our NPC, right now we've got it just very basic setup. So let's pull them out and show that it's working. We'll grab our NPC here. We can establish some text, some speech for it in the details panel. Oh, before we do that, we need to go back into our speech bubble and actually tell it to use that text style set. So you'll see this changes. Compile that. Now we can jump out here. And when I run up to talk, that is not nearly a big enough interaction trace. So we'll bump that up substantially. And 150 sounds good. But then we also, one thing I did forget is we actually have to tell the NPC's mesh to respond to that trace, otherwise it won't hit. So under its collision settings, we'll go to custom, and we'll set it to block the visibility channel. I'm going to set it to ignore the camera channel on that one. And on the capsule collision, just ignore the camera, just so it doesn't do that push the camera in real fast thing. So now we got it popping up, but we can't get it off screen just yet. So what we need to do is, once we've reached the end of our speech roundup, whatever, we will tell it to stop. So we are going to get the length of our array and see if our current speech reaches it. So we will take this and see if it is greater than or equal to the length of the array. We'll add a branch here. I'm gonna change this up a little bit. So basically we're saying, because the length will always be one more than the array index, because the length starts from 1, but an array, which this is, starts at 0. So as we add to it, if it reaches the point to where this number reaches the length, that means we're at the very last one. If we're not at the last one, that means we're trying to talk. If it is greater than or equal to the very last one, then we are trying to stop speaking. And the way we can tell it is when we start speaking, we will take this current speech, we'll add 1 to it, and we will see if that is a valid index. Actually, I think we can get away with just incrementing it, so we don't need to do a check here. We'll just increment it like that, and then when we stop speaking, we'll set it back to 0. That should be right. So now we'll add 1 more speech block. Windy today, huh? I don't know what to say. So we got speech bubble, hit it again, windy today, hit it again, it's gone. Alright, but how do we change the color of it? So to do that, remember when we had the objective and the direction? We add that into the speech. So let's change this to some kind of objective. Can't believe I forgot my... This is the important part. You're going to use the... What is it? The less than type in objective, make sure it matches exactly, and then close it in. And then we'll say wallet, then less than / the one right there on the question mark, and then that one, the greater than, I guess. And then when we jump in, it will use the settings from that objective text. So, let's see, I think I left it on my direction night stand less than / greater than. And there you go. That's pretty simple setup for dialogue with objective pointers and what have you. Just because someone's probably going to ask now that that part's over, what happens if I talk and then I run far away? I can't interact and get it off screen, right? So what we can do as one more little feature thingy, so when they start speaking, we'll pass along the actor speaking. This will be an actor reference, so actor object. And then in the third person character, when we start speaking, we'll set a custom event, measure distance to speaker. And this will take in our actor speaking actor reference. So take this to be an actor object reference also. Then when we start speaking, first we're going to tell it to measure the distance to the speaker. And then we will get distance to. The target is our actor speaking, the other actor is self. And then if it gets greater than or equal to, let's say 1,000, ooh, that's very close, right? 0.1. If it gets further than 1,000 units, then we will call our stop speaking function. If it doesn't, then we're good to go. We will add a branch check in here to see if we are still currently speaking. So right click, be still speaking, because we need a way to cancel this out. If we went all the way through, we don't want this still processing in the background. So when we're speaking up here, we'll just say still speaking is true. And then down here when we stop speaking, we'll set that to false. Did I set it to true? I set it to true. So, if we do get further away than 1,000 units, we need to be able to call this. We could get the player character and then do the message, but I would rather just set up another custom event, stop speech, and we'll just plug that in right there. And then if we're further away than 1,000 units, we call that stop speech. If we're not, then we'll do a delay until next tick, then call our measure distance to speaker, and we'll plug that in here, reroute it to pretty it up a little bit. Oh no. Alright, move that up so we don't get confused, clean that up too. So now, I can jump in and talk, and then if I get further than 1,000 units away, it does nothing. Did I forget to call it? NPC. Oh, I forgot to tell it who was speaking. So NPC event, we'll just tell it self. It didn't know who to measure from. Handy information to have. So what did I do wrong now? I figured out what's happening and it's dumb. So here in the third person character, the measure distance to speaker, if it's this close to the beginning, for some reason doesn't work. So we'll just go and take this to the very end. And then now it registers the way it's supposed to. One more issue we need to address though is that if we do that and then we run away and then we come back, their text should start over. Because if we run away now and then come back and try to interact, since it registers it being at the end, it doesn't pop up. We have to talk twice. So the way we can do that is we will go to our BPI interact and add another function called reset speech. I already added one because I was experimenting a little bit to figure out. Everything else got put back the way it was, but this I forgot to delete. So just add function reset speech, and then inside the third person character down here, when we're measuring the distance to it, if we get greater than that distance, when we stop the speech, we want to tell the actor speaking to reset their speech. And then what we can do for reset speech in here, get rid of that. Apparently I didn't remember everything. We'll do an event reset speech and just set the current speech back to 0 so that when we run back up, we'll talk right from the beginning again. So checking it one more time. Yeah. So there you go, a little simple dialogue system with color changing objectives and distance measuring. So sorry for the meandering a little bit, but I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good time. Bye.